Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. I'm here with all 5 of the Real Chili Podcast fellas, and I'll tell you what, I was driving into work today. I had finally, just this morning, gotten over Marquette's blowout loss at the hands of Murray State and John Morant. I was excited about Marcus Howard returning for his senior season, and I was over the moon about Tiger Woods being the GOAT. And then I get a text from my dear friend, Pete Worth, and holy shit, did the day light on fire and turned into something I did not think it would. The news came this afternoon that Sam Hauser and Joey Hauser are transferring away from Marquette. Pete Worth, you had the intel first. What a day.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank all of my deep sources out there for giving me the scoop. I didn't post it. You never saw any of my posts on social media, but I definitely was thinking about it quite a bit this morning and thought I would relay the information that I received to all you folks. I didn't want to do that. I was fearing Bubbles having a heart attack after Tiger won the Masters yesterday. I thought that was too big of bombshells and too big stories.
I don't know why you would. I don't know why you would think that. I'm more than capable of handling it. I've gone through the 5 stages of grief all this afternoon to tonight. I'm in a great place. This is reality. We're here to give the people their therapy. It was going to be a postseason reacts pod, but Eric Pond, the sky is falling in my world. How about yours?
It is falling hard.
Very fast.
Very fast. I just want to say, I know I relayed this on the text chain, but I want everyone in Real Chili Nation to know I'm a proud son of Wausau, Wisconsin, blood rival with Spash. And I should have known. I should have seen it all along. This is the most logical outcome to the Hauser brothers story with Marquette. Just sort of pinching myself for ever trusting a few bros from Spash.
And before throwing it to Pete Mohan here, we should say that we're going to be very clear on this pod that this is not a podcast to come personally at Sam Hauser, at Joey Hauser for their decision. We assume that they made this decision based on their own best interest and have absolutely no problem with that. That said, we are going to analyze this from all different angles, and you may get a little uncomfortable at some point. So I wanted to make that point. And Pete Mohan, you were as active as anyone today on this text chain analyzing what this means for Marquette in the future. So I think we're going to have a robust discussion here today, Pete.
Well, I mean, I'm just excited for today. I'm excited about this news.
You're excited about this news?
Excited about this news. We found some players on this team who clearly weren't with us, and therefore that means they against us. And if you've got guys that aren't 100% bought in, and I bet Wojo is slapping me on the back because he agrees so much. If these guys aren't 100% on board, and let's be clear, these are some difficult transfer circumstances based on the eligibility of both Hauser brothers, and clearly something significant had to have happened. We can speculate on what that is, but it's not like this is a natural transfer situation. Sam will have to sit out a year to play 1 year somewhere, and Joey had already burned some time as well, so he only has 2 years left. So it's really kind of a situation that wouldn't normally naturally happen in a transfer. Clearly something happened here, but
hang on, Pete Mohan bringing some remember the Titans. If they're not with us, they're against us. Come on, Pete.
I'm so glad
I even heard Wisconsin is in the mix for these guys. Tells me all I need to know. Bye.
All right.
Talking that blood is thicker than water stuff.
Right. I'm so glad Mike gave that disclaimer at the beginning of the pod because we're going for it.
And I'm glad that we still got Jamal Cain rolling with us. after speculation, oh, is Jamal really with us? Is he going to transfer? We still got Jamal. He's true.
Well, let's get in, Mike.
Well,
not to steal your role a little bit, but let's get into maybe kind of the parabola, the peak of the parabola on the downslope of kind of what led to all this.
Well, I don't know what that means, but let's revisit the timeline.
We got comm majors talking about math here. It's great.
All right, let's revisit the timeline here and get back get back on track. So on Thursday, March 21st, Marquette loses to Murray State. That was a Thursday. 3 weeks to the day later, we believe Thursday, April 11th, was Marquette basketball's banquet, in which Ben Steele has reported that Marcus Howard and Sam Hauser were both awarded. They were given the co-MVP for the season. Interestingly, the following day, last Friday, April 12th, Marcus Howard publicly announced that he would be returning to Marquette for his senior season. The first business day after Marcus Howard made that announcement, that would be today, Monday, April 15th. The announcement came from Marquette basketball's official Twitter handle at 10:32 a.m., which said the Hauser brothers had decided to transfer. So that's the timeline we're operating under. In terms of reported details, there isn't much more. I do want to say from the very beginning, there are a lot of rumors out there that there have been a confrontation or a spat between Marcus Howard and the Hauser brothers. None of that is substantiated by any legitimate reporting with sources. So I wanted to give voice.
Say it.
I wanted to give fake news. I wanted to give voice to that. I don't want us to rely on that as a fact, but it is something that is out there. What we know is the timeline that I just described, and we know that Sam and Joey Hauser are gone. And Pete, is that the parabola you were talking about?
Yeah, and just you saying that Sam and Joey are gone, it's just like another kick to the groin. Like this is big enough and shocking enough news to me to where, like, even when I went to the grocery store today, I was just like, oh man, everybody's gonna be talking about this. Like, I'm checking out, I'm getting my lunch, like checking it out, and I'm like, you see the Hausers are gone? To the checkout clerk, she's like, nah, I have no idea what you're talking about. But that's what it felt like. You felt like everybody, like, this was big enough news in the Marquette world to be like, what in the absolute fuck had to have led to this moment? Like, Marquette, like Sam and Joey, not only, let's forget about the transfer ramifications of this, but like, they're hometown kids. They're Wisconsin kids playing at their hometown school. Like, they're synonymous with Marquette the last couple of years, at least Sam was. And they're like, outside of Marcus, they're the identity and they're the focal point of our team. The fact that they're not going to be there anymore is just completely mind-blowing.
Let me start by attempting to answer Pete's question, Mike, and I think this is going to be the main crux of our conversation. You know, you started off by saying we're going to look at this from all angles. There's really only two angles here. This is either a colossal failure by the coaching staff to identify a rift in its three best players, or we have a colossal failure by our team leaders in their inability to resolve differences internally. Every team, anybody who's played a competitive team sport knows that this stuff happens. People want more shots. People want more passes, catch, whatever it is. Playing time. How this got to a point where, like you said, business day after it's announced Marcus is returning, that these two said, F it, we're not playing with him anymore. I look at the coaching staff and I look at them and go, how in God's name do we let it get to this?
And I agree, and I don't think those two were mutually exclusive. I think both probably went on at the same time.
For sure.
And neither party was able to successfully address the problem before it turned into this.
That's where I kind of want to hear all of you. Like, Eric, like, I mean, when you look at Wojo at this, I mean, that's eventually – whenever Wojo steps in front of reporters, whenever that next day is, that's got to be the first question that's asked, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's no way that in some way, shape, or form this goes to a failure of the coaching staff. I think that absolutely, one way or another, is sort of the root of some of that, and whether that's being able to sort through some of the interpersonal issues on that team or being able to manage against it with, playtime or game scripts or whatever to make sure that your second and third best player are happy. What I really just can't get over is the fact that given how negative the transfer situation is for the Hauser brothers, there must have been something so irreconcilable within that locker room that it's baffling how it could get that bad that it could not be overcome just by sitting through sessions as a team, working through it, getting in the gym, having Wojo lead them through this. I don't know, guys. I'm at a loss here.
So what that means, Pete Mohan, is that Sam Hauser can't get a grad transfer. So Sam Hauser, no matter where he goes, is going to have to sit out a year and then play a year. Joey Hauser, will have to sit out a year as well and lose a year of eligibility. So to Eric's point, the thing that had to force them, to compel them to leave, particularly Sam, where he's been for 3 years and built a life for himself, that has to be a huge there has to be a huge motivation for them to want to leave, and a huge problem. We don't know what that problem is, but it has to be significant.
It has to be significant. And the one thing that we haven't brought up potentially as an issue is
Daddy,
Big Daddy. I mean, like if the dad is in the conversation for whatever reason, good, bad, or whatever, if in speculation and rumors, and then the dad comes out and says it's not Marcus, that wasn't the problem. The fact that the dad is fucking commenting on this shit means that there's some parental meddling going on, or, even if it's just to Joey and Sam saying, this should be your team, we don't like Marcus's hero ball, whatever it is. I'm just totally speculating. I'm not saying that any of this necessarily happened, but clearly there was something going on there. And, it's unfortunate, but parents misbehaving and meddling in their kids' sports is something that we must confront in today's sporting environment. It's prevalent, and it's certainly something that could be a possibility here. Just throwing that out there. I don't know what you guys think.
I think it's entirely possible. And look, there's obviously parents need to be need to guide their kids and to give their kids good advice and getting in the best situation. But it does seem like there's a line, somewhere around where the basketball court starts, that it should be more within the realm of coaches. Again, we don't know exactly what went on with the parents here. There are reports that Mr. Hauser in particular was a very involved fan and kind of developed some sort of cult following amongst Marquette fans at the various different games for his flamboyance at these games.
I did not know that.
Well, it had been mentioned several times on Twitter, I believe, by some official sources. But Brian, I think we're looking at this situation, and all of a sudden, for so long we had been trying to wrap our heads around the how this team shit its pants down the stretch. Up until this point, we had said, an injury to Marcus, and who knows? Sometimes you go on a losing streak. All of a sudden, there is a much more vital, much more plausible thing to throw in the mix here about what could have happened to this team. And it plays into Marcus's usage rate. It plays into Sam and Joey's usage rate. Are we getting a clearer picture of maybe what happened down the stretch of this season?
I don't think there's any way to look at this situation and say this was bound to happen regardless of how the year ended, Mike, and everybody. I think you'd agree. If this team wins the Big East regular season title, I would be completely blown away if we were having this conversation today. Maybe it would, but that just winning tends to cure all ills. We had a disastrous end of the season, and let's be fair, Marcus did not play well down the stretch and was a big reason why we struggled. He took a ton of shots like he continued to do, had a 1 for 15 game against Seton Hall when we got beat, and went 9 for 27 in an ass kicking. And Mike, you were polite when we were beaten by Murray State. We got our asses kicked by Murray State, and Joey got his head dunked into the Stone Age.
Hey, he made one shining moment.
He did make one shining moment, but I mean, like that was as depressing a way to end the season because it felt like everything was for naught. I mean, they didn't even show up; they got run off the court. I think that absolutely had a huge way to do with it. I'm curious. I mean, Pete Worth, I'm curious And I don't say, we joke here about Pete's basketball prowess. He was a normal, regular high school player. But Pete, of everybody on this pod, you were
normal.
Wow. Well,
right.
Pete, you were a volume shooter to a degree, and you did it decently. Safe to say, I mean, when you watch a guy like Marcus shoot at the volume he did, and when he's not making shots, that has to burn the other 4 guys on the court and 4 or 5 guys on the bench going, maybe I could throw a rock in the ocean here. Like that. It's not shocking that might be a big reason why it led to this. Fair?
It might be a little fair, yeah, but I still think that the bigger part is that Sam and Joey had opportunities to take over themselves when Marcus was struggling, and they did not do that down the stretch. Sam was chucking up the same bad shots that Marcus was, and he just can't get an open shot as good as Marcus can, or as well as Marcus can. So, yeah, I can see why they might be frustrated that Marcus gets all the attention, all the glory, all the accolades, the weekly player of the week, whatever, what have you. But, there's still some onus on them as the significant contributors to this team to perform when your best player is not performing. And they certainly did not do that down the stretch either.
Yeah, I totally want to echo what Pete is saying here, that we, what was it, 6 out of our last 7 games that we lost or something like that?
6 or 7, yep.
Don't tell me that there was no opportunity for them to seize a leadership role on this team when Marcus was injured. Exactly what Pete says. We were begging for more Joey down the stretch and in the tournament game, and didn't really show up. I mean, he kind of hit a wall around that time that we started going downhill. We had to rely a little more on Sakar, but in the whole year, we've all said it, even from the first game, Sam's kind of off. It seems like, shots just aren't going in, or he just didn't seem like he was playing like himself. And I think the other fact too is that there wasn't much development in Sam's game. The possibility was that he was going to be a bench player next year because he hasn't developed on defense, and clearly our wings showed that they couldn't help on those dump-offs in the tournament game, and they were a part of that problem. So, if Sam's a 6th man, Mr. Hauser and Sam and Joey, they're saying we're taking our ball and going home. I think that's definitely a possibility, and I think it's a possibility when Wojo came into tears talking about help, that he was potentially talking about the Hausers and not talking about Jamal Cain in terms of people knowing their role and, knowing when they shouldn't be getting shots or time. There's a possibility he might have been talking about the Hausers when he was saying that.
So for me, we've been talking about the 6 of 7 losses in the context of Marcus's potential injury. Again, we don't know. Marcus has denied it publicly. But I think it's really interesting to think about, and I think it's perfectly plausible that some sort of internal misunderstanding amongst some of the parties that we've been talking about here could have contributed to this skid. I think it's interesting that looking over the box scores of the 6 out of 7 losses, there are games when Sam Hauser puts up 25 points and he's really the guy stepping up. It was still a loss. There are games when Joey Hauser put up big points. A common theme, though, in most of those losses was an inability of Marquette to finish in the last, 8 minutes or so, in the last 5 to 8 minutes of a game.
Right.
I don't know. That's when it's crunch time in some of these games. That is when the biggest players want to step up and they want to shine. That is when it can get a little more difficult to move the ball around. It tends to stick a little bit more in some of those moments. I don't know. It's really difficult to say. We're trying to put some of the pieces together for you because we wanted to talk about it here. But it is interesting to think about of how this dynamic amongst these guys, amongst the coaching staff, could have contributed to this loss, because it's not like, oh shit, all of a sudden this just popped up over the last week. That's not how this works.
Oh, for sure.
This dynamic had to have existed well before at least the middle part of this season, and naturally the season would produce a result that was driven by that.
And these guys aren't dumb. Like, they know what's returning next year. Right. I don't know if we've laid that out yet. This is a top 10 team coming back next year. The preseason favorite to win the conference, a preseason first-team All-American.
ESPN had us at number 2.
Right. Now, that's I think that's ridiculous. But nevertheless, the point is, if you're in the top 10 – on paper, you got a shot, right? If the goal is to win the whole freaking thing, you got a roster that on paper, if healthy, has a shot at it. And the fact that these guys could not, with the coaches and the players, and I talk about everybody in the room, and that's Sakar, that's Jamal, that's Brendan Bailey. It's everybody that wears a uniform can be a contributing factor because this stuff goes on. And it got to a point, Mike, as you said, it was irreparable and they had to go. And that's where I just go, how do you let it get to that point knowing what could potentially be in front of you? And they're willing to walk away from that. And that, to me, is the saddest part about it, that they let it get to that point.
Going back to Mike's comment to open the pod here, Sam and Marcus selected as co-MVPs by Wojo of last season at the team's award banquet on Thursday. I mean, that just shows like a last-ditch effort, obviously, by Wojo and that staff to try to give credit, obviously, to both parties, probably to try to make one last-ditch attempt at fixing this thing. It's just funny to read that. It was a little nugget tucked within Ben Steele's great piece today, but it says so much about this team. I think the one big worry, or the one thing we have to hope, is that the dysfunction within the team really stops with a Hauser brothers versus Marcus, spat of some sort that got to this, and that it hasn't devolved to the point where people were taking sides. You have the divided locker room that goes further down. This is all pure speculation, even starting with the Marcus, spat situation and what we've seen. But
hang on, Eric, let me interrupt you for a second. Back up to the Providence game where they blitz Providence off the court. They have a 2-game lead in the conference. Everybody's digging and loving each other. Marcus didn't even have a great game. The Hausers actually kind of tore it up from what I remember. And Theo had a decent day.
That might be the start of it, Brian, because of that.
Right, but you're telling me like that strife was there then? And I agree, it probably was to some degree, but like that's where I go, like there's no way in that point of February that this thing was on the verge of coming apart like this. It had to. I mean, this has to be boiled down to those final 7 games and how it ended and how sour everybody must have been to have the season to fall apart like it did. I mean, maybe not, but God, that would stun me. Am I being too ridiculous in thinking that?
Well, can't the answer be somewhere in the middle here? I mean, it doesn't have to be that Providence game. It doesn't have to be after the final game and John Morant just steamrolling us. Like, clearly the team was misaligned significantly going into the Big East tournament and going to the NCAA tournament. I don't know. Again, pure speculation. It's so hard here, and hopefully one day someone writes a tell-all book from the locker room of the 2018-19 Golden Eagles.
A season on the brink.
Right, yeah. Cam Murata is going to write this in
forward by Chris O'Toole.
Come on the pod, Cam.
Exactly. But who knows? Who knows? But I would put good money on it happening towards the end of the Big East regular season if it did happen. Right.
There's so many unknowns here, right? Like, when did it happen? When did this whole thing kind of bubble out of control? Did it start at the very beginning? Maybe it was that Providence game where the Hausers like, Marcus fucking sucked in this game, and we had our best game ever. Like, we should be the ones that lead this team. We clearly play better when we're the star of the show. Who knows? Who knows when and where this all started?
Who knows? Look, the Marcus and Sam have been on the same team together since 2017. They've played together for a long time with seemingly no outward issues. So I do think it is ridiculous to say that the final 7 games that they played together, somehow something magically happened that wasn't there before. That doesn't happen in the real world. You have relationships with people where, even if you like them very much, there can be things about them that irk you, and certain situations can bring that out and make it come to a an unreasonable conclusion. But I agree, Brian, with you and with everybody else, that it still is really unreasonable for those 6 of 7 games to have resulted in this. I clearly think, and this is kind of one of the questions that I want to ask the group as we get closer and closer to wrapping this up. It is unquestionable that this is ultimately on Steve Wojciechowski and the coaching staff. You cannot let this situation come to this point and get to this point where we have this outcome with our number 2 and 3 leading scorers leaving the program. But I want to pose the question, how do we know how much blame to put on him, given the fact that there are so many variables and we don't know maybe how off the reservation Mr. Hauser was in driving some of this. We don't know maybe how off the reservation others were in driving this. We can assume they had good intent. We can assume all parties did. I'm trying to get a grasp on how much of this blame we can put on Wojo.
The answer is we don't, as of we record this pod, but eventually Wojo will speak for himself. And while I don't think he's going to be completely honest, he'll hopefully shed some light on the topic. I can guarantee you this is becoming a national story. The big college basketball writers are going to dig into this, whether it's Rothstein or Seth Davis or Jeff Goodman or whomever. Someone's going to find out and is going to write about it, and we'll be doing a follow-up podcast to whenever that story comes. But you're right, Mike. I mean, this will ultimately come at the foot of the coaching staff, and if it really comes down to, and the moral of the story is their negligence to put it out, I hope it's not, but it's incredibly damning, and I don't know where we go. It sucks.
But on the other side of the coin, when do we get to give Wojo credit for sticking true to his ethics or his ideals or the type of program he wants to run?
That's fair.
If something like this came up against the way he wants to run a program and he's like, sorry, this is the way it is. This isn't a me versus you, but this is the way I'm running my program. If that doesn't fit you and your family, I think we have to identify that as well. This isn't a vacuum. These are 2 brothers. This is an in-state situation. This isn't a normal, just one-off recruiting situation. All of this is a package deal. But I think that that's certainly something that, if that is the case, I mean, shouldn't we be giving Wojo credit for being true to building a program the right way? And it seemed like that was the way the athletic department wanted to ship post-Buzz, right? Someone that's going to build a program the right way, do things his way, and be true to that, and build a culture here at Marquette, blah, blah, blah. If he's doing that, can't we be crediting him for that?
Totally. I think that's a tremendous point. I think the only problem is that I don't know if we ultimately ever get that closure. I don't know if Brian, I think you're right. Someone's going to write about this. In what level of detail, we don't know. But it feels like it could always be a he said type of thing. And I don't know if we'll ever get that kind of arbiter where we get the condensed version of the truth.
Well, I think the sweetest would be a rerun of the One Shining Moment, but Theo John rejecting Joey Hauser at the rim in his futile attempt. As
with his big W on his chest?
Whoever they go play for, we're going to face them in the tournament. That shit is going to happen. That we'll both make the tournament and then end up being matched up. So I look forward to that day in 2 years when that goes down, because that will be a great basketball game.
The big takeaway here is to just not recruit brothers. Don't take that the wrong way.
So racist.
God, jeez, Pete, unbelievable.
That's 2 times he's done that, and it hasn't worked out too well.
What about the cracked sidewalks?
That is true. This is the second time we've had a pair of brothers not work out so well.
So we wanted to move on, and we promised we would, to a little bit of a conversation around what this means for Marquette going forward. So what the Hausers are gone, and that dramatically alters Marquette's roster. Some of us, I think, are going to say, we'll figure out the pieces next year. We won't be as good as we had thought, but we'll be okay. I find myself a little bit more on the alarmist end. But I think it is unquestionably, Marquette was, as we said, going to be ranked in the top 10, at least at the beginning of the season. And there were national title hopes, Final Four hopes, maybe let's put it that way. Losing the production that you have from Sam Hauser, losing the production that you had from Joey Hauser, as young as he was, that is a huge blow to this team. The defense that both of those guys provided, the versatility, the switchability that both of those guys provided. I think the biggest challenge with replacing them isn't saying, look at Joey's 15 points or look at Sam's 15 points per game, and we can replace that with this guy. It's replacing the total package of each guy. That's what made them so good. And to be honest, fellas, that's what has me really worried about next year now, is that those are the two most all-around versatile guys on our roster, and they're both gone now. And I don't think that means good things for next year.
Am I the only one that disagrees with that statement that they're well-rounded players? I'm sorry. I hate to pile on, but I really don't think that Sam was much of a plus defender. I think Joey has more athleticism, had more potential to develop into a good defensive player, and they essentially knew their role in the defense. But when was the last time you were like, one of the Hauser bros made a game-winning play on defense?
Well, right, but you also need people to put the ball in the basket too, and Sam was damn good at that.
Yeah, they are, but also we have disparate parts to this offense. We have guys that play well in the open court, run and gun game, like Marcus and Sakar. Even Theo and Ed are kind of that run the court type of big, that are suited to that type of play. And let's face it, Sam and Joey are excellent half-court offensive players. But does that fit with this roster? And were they taking the game plan a different way? I don't know. But certainly you have to admit that Sam and Joey are one offensive style that isn't necessarily the perfect mix with Marcus's game and maybe some of the other guys in the program.
Yeah, I think all your points are valid, Pete. And I'm kind of the one I'm kind of right in the middle, where I do think we are a better team with the Hausers, but we have the potential to be a much different team and a much more athletic team. The biggest flaw in the 2018 Marquette Golden Eagles was that we didn't create any turnovers, and we never got any transition points off those turnovers. And we turned the ball over a lot.
Yeah, we gave up a lot of turnovers.
It was a story about turnovers. And that, it's mostly due to the unathleticism of our roster. Yeah, we were a great half-court team. We were a great shooting team. But the transition dunks, you could probably count on one hand. That happened all last year. Mm-hmm. So it's this next coming year without the Hausers is going to be so dependent on these guards. McEwen coming in, Greg Elliott coming back from injury, Jamal Cain. Can he boost his offensive stock? Because we already know he's a pretty good defender, great rebounder. These three guys are going to be the story about how we can recover from this.
I think one interesting thing is how this team will become more perimeter-oriented because since both –
Wait, more perimeter-oriented?
Let me rephrase. More guard-heavy ball handling because, Sam and Joey, they made hay from the perimeter, right? However, that kind of is it. Having your forwards out there on the perimeter is a different type of game than what we're going to see going forward because we're going to rely essentially, certainly our wings will be shooting some threes, but this game, the offense that we're going to have is going to be more dominated by Marcus and Kobe McEwen on the perimeter, and then off the bench to a lesser extent, Greg Elliott. There's not going to be any more post-ups into Sam and Joey that then our guys have to run off. This is going to be a good ball handling team that dribbles, drives, and kicks to open shooters. And we didn't have that element last year. We didn't have that really strong driving ability and good ball handling skills. And I think that that's something that we're going to see a major improvement on next year.
Well, I would agree with that in theory, but I don't necessarily trust at this point that Jamal and Greg and Kobe are going to be good at that. I think they should be doing that for this team to have success. I just don't trust it. I want to see it.
Yeah.
But
I expect Kobe to be a 30-minute a game primary ball handler for it, point guard next season. And I think Marcus is best suited as the 2, but Kobe has enough size that he can be that good primary guard defender.
Did we say that about Chartouni last year?
To be fair, yeah. What are we saying about Chartouni at this point last year? That was my point.
Well, those are 2 totally different players, though. Let's just
if you're looking at traditional positions 1 through 5 on a basketball court, the 3 and the 4 spot is where Joey and Sam played the majority of their minutes this year. Obviously, they both got Joey got some run at the 5 at times in certain lineups, and that mixed up a little bit. But I think the biggest thing for me is with Sam and Joey being gone, that 3 and 4 spot, we're adding Kobe, and that'll be great. Greg is coming back, but we're not adding height. We're not adding, height at those positions. And Mohan, I think that was a great point you made, in that a more guard-oriented perimeter offense where we had Sam and Joey who could be out, outside of the 3-point line and get inside. I don't know if we're going to have those guys who have that fluidity to do both, play the inside and outside game like Sam and Joey did. Jamal could. I don't know if we've seen it yet. Brendan Bailey maybe has the best shot. So that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch as, early next year develops.
This team will have new players on it as well going into next season, correct? I mean, we have 2 –
well, just Kobe, right? Kobe
and Dexter Akano. He's a 3-star guard.
Right.
So some new faces, but not necessarily faces that you think would fit into that mold, right?
It's going to have to be an up-tempo game. I mean, we're going to have to run and gun and create turnovers on defense. I think it'll be a fun team to watch, a fun brand of basketball. But I think you guys are right. Our struggles will be half-court offense probably. But if we can create turnovers and create those fast break opportunities, I think that we could be one of the best transition offenses out there.
I don't disagree with your optimism, Pete, and I don't think this is a death nail for next year. I think there's still plenty there to be a very competitive and a good team, but I think that the expectation is now shifted from, obviously potential, as you said, Mike, compete for a Final Four, God forbid, compete for a national title, to just make the tournament and be in and be relevant. And I think that'll be a successful season. And at least in my head, that's where it shifts to, because there's going to be a lot of growing to do next year. There's going to be people in new roles, as Pete outlined, and they're going to, how fast do they gel? How well do they defend? We're going to play a completely different way, as was already outlined. So it's going to take there's going to be some growing pains that come with that, as opposed to returning maybe the most experienced team in college basketball.
Well, and this news today is going to stick with that team all year. They're going to have to answer questions about the Hausers leaving all year, and whether there was a rift between the Hausers and Marcus and the Hausers and Wojo. I mean, this story today is not going to go away anytime soon. So that's another indicator of how Wojo will be able to steer the ship in the right direction. By having to deal with all that publicity throughout the entire season about these departures, in addition to bringing in the newcomers and making them gel like he couldn't do with this roster.
Eric, I want to toss this question to you because, if Pete Mohan is the angel on the right hand, on my right hand shoulder, saying, shouldn't we be giving Wojo credit, which I totally hear and think it's a good argument. I think a lot of the fan base is looking at this the other way and saying, let's get Wojo out of here. I don't think I am there yet, but perhaps more than ever before, I can see that argument building. But Eric, the question I have for you is, have we gone too easy on Wojo on this episode of this podcast? Should we be pointing the finger more at him than we have? We've said he's ultimately responsible, and this is ultimately on him. Does he deserve more of the blame than we've given him?
So when the news was breaking this morning and when it was perhaps a little bit more unclear as to what had led to this situation, it's where my mind first jumped was how can Wojo stay if this leads back to him? How does this program continue to exist under his leadership? With just the indication that perhaps it was something going on between the Hauser brothers and Marcus and not knowing what's at the root of that, I think it's still too early to go too hard on Wojo. We look at a lot of programs around the country. There are rumors swirling at IU that program and that team basically imploded because Romeo Langford slept with one of the teammates' girlfriends.
Wait, what?
And now
Breaking news.
They have half the program transferring out. It's on all the.
That's what destroyed Indiana this year.
That's what rumor has it. You talk about
rumor has it.
Who's the NBA? I think it was an NBA coach. Someone
It's more
said,
of a Romeo than we thought.
So, someone said like women and money destroy NBA locker rooms. I wouldn't go there, but there's so many things that could have happened that could have been out of the control of Wojo and the coaching staff to some degree. It's just too early to speculate and to go too hard on them at this point. But again, I understand that a lot of the fan base is probably going there right now.
Pete Worth, do you agree? Disagree?
Like Eric said, it's hard to know with so many unknowns.
Let's go.
Geez, suddenly you're holding your shorts a little bit, Brian.
Brian.
The fact that, yes, I will go hard on Wojo. I've been a Wojo apologist for this entire length of the pod. I have never really disparaged him all that much. And that's because I always want to give coaches the time to build their program, to get the guys in the right spots, to get the right character people in there. And he's done that. And he had a top 10 team this year until it all fell apart. Now, the thing that kills me is that these guys are from Wisconsin. They both have to lose a year next year, in addition to Joey losing a year entirely altogether. And the fact that he couldn't put the pieces together and keep the relationships together with everybody coming back for a huge potential season next year. Yeah. I mean, Marquette fans have the right to be pissed off, I think, at that. But at the same time, with the things we don't know, it's probably goes both ways. Like, we can be pissed at teenagers making a decision for what they want to do best, but it's still okay to be upset about it.
Right.
And the fact that they didn't really have that killer instinct throughout that year, and it's easy to maybe drift towards, well, the Howers are just kind of maybe a little weak and didn't, when things got tough, they didn't get tough. So I'm sorry for not going one specific way, but I could see it both ways.
Yeah, I think it's – to wrap it up here, I think when we're talking about Wojo, I think if you look at the big picture for Marquette and you look at the big picture for this basketball program, you see that Wojo let this situation fester to the point that this is the ultimate result. But I think what we don't know, what you cannot say without further clarity and detail, and probably details that only a very few people will ever know, is what actually was the impetus for this, and was that something that was ultimately within Wojo's control? Yes, he was the coach, but as you just pointed out, Pete Worth, he can only control so much. So I don't know if we're ever going to get the answer to this. I don't think it's a good look. It is not a great data point overall for Wojo. But Pete Mohan, to your point, maybe this is the program he was trying to build, and the values that they were talking about weren't consistent with the program. I think it's too early to tell. Hopefully we'll have a pod within the next few weeks to talk a little bit more about it. Fellas, that is going to wrap us up here on this episode of the Real Chili Podcast. As of this morning, we thought this was going to be a season recap, but oh no, the universe had different things in mind. So fellas, thanks for hopping on this pod with me. I hope you got fun plans for the rest of the night.
Well, I'm just going to sit here thinking about what could have been, drafting lyrics to On Eagles Wings and Marquette basketball. So that'll be my
drafting lyrics, don't they? And Marquette basketball.
Yeah. For our On Eagles Wings parody song about the Hausers coming soon.
Soon.
One thing that will be unforgivable, and I think we have to fire Wojo over, is if he lets Hanif Cheatham fester on the transfer market without bringing that motherfucker back.
Let's go, Hanif. We got playing time. Come back home, Hanif.
Give me some left-handed layups, baby.
That's what I'm talking about.
Hey,
Well, we're
if
at
you
it.
can't
Where's
beat him,
Wally
cheat him.
Ellison? Go get him too. Come on. Let's go.
I also
Get
think we say this is the ultimate favor Buzz Williams in this funny universe gives us, because isn't like half that Va-Tech team transferring? Let's get some gritty, cracked sidewalks, Buzz Williams motherfuckers.
Oh, that would be beautiful.
Some Buzz scrubs. I would love that.
Yeah, some Buzz scrappy scrubs.
Give me some trends. I want
Just
this team is 3 trend blackledges away from going back to the Final Four.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
Fuck
God.
yes.
All right.
And I will
right.
say about this whole thing, just to wrap this up on the attitude thing, was there a player who rolled his eyes and had bad body language more than Sam?
That's a great point. There were a lot of eye rolls.
Body language doctor did not like. I don't recall you bringing up bad Sam body language this year. Was it? I don't feel like I noticed it.
Sometimes it's at himself for missing shots, but I think other times it's teammates and shit like that.
That's going to do it for us here on this episode of the Real Chili Podcast. Signing off for Eric Pond, signing off for Brian Henry, signing off for Pete Worth, and signing off for Pete Mohan. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. Thanks, as always, for listening to this episode of the Real Chili Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Real Chili Pod. We're a great follow. Keep an eye out for future episodes. And as always, we'll talk to you next time here on the Real Chili Podcast.